You're watching your local election headquarters. An ABC4 News Town Hall Special, America in Crisis, a positive path forward.
Welcome back to America in Crisis, a positive path forward. The U.S. has spent trillions on the pandemic response and multiple relief packages, but the crisis is not over yet. Should lowering the national debt still be a priority for lawmakers? Utah Senator Mitt Romney joining me once again to discuss what the country's financial future could look like. All right, Senator, we already got into the relief programs. You were one of the first ones calling for that to take place. Why was that?
Well, we had people that were hurting, and we did not want families to not have housing, to not have food, to not have clothing, and so we had to get help to people. That's when you actually do borrow money, is when there's a crisis, when there's an emergency. When you don't want to be borrowing money is when there are normal operations of government and when the economy is strong. In a circumstance like that, you should not be borrowing, and we have been. We've been borrowing about $1 trillion a year, even under Republican leadership, and that, in my opinion, is unacceptable.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little more. 25 trillion and counting. You look at that number and it's hard to even comprehend exactly how much money that is. One of your big campaign promises was that you were a deficit hawk. We talked about that quite a bit. So moving forward, you already mentioned, this is the time to spend when Americans need it, but there are ways to cut. So moving forward, how do you begin to chip away at that deficit?
I've actually introduced a piece of legislation called the Trust Act, which is designed to look at all of our major trust funds: Social Security, disability, Medicare, Medicaid, the Highway Trust Fund, and so forth, and make sure that those are no longer spending massively more than we take in. These will have to be solved on a bipartisan basis. There'll be no change or reduction in benefits to people who are seniors or who rely on these programs today, but younger generations need to understand what the promises are for them. This will help get us to a point where we have a balanced budget and stop borrowing money every single year. The people who buy America's debt are not worried about buying the debt when we're in a crisis like we are now. But if they see us every year continuing the borrowing, they're going to raise interest rates, and it could become backbreaking. So we have to tackle this annual deficit, which then adds to the total debt of our country. That's something I'm fighting to get done, and hopefully we'll get this bill passed relatively soon.
As I mentioned, we continue to watch that deficit increase. What type of a time frame? Here at the state level, we see a balanced budget. We don't see that on the national level. What type of time frame do you think is realistic to actually chip away at that huge number?
Well, if we stop adding $1 trillion of new debt every year, why, then the debt that we already have gets to be a smaller and smaller share of our economy. It gets to be less and less significant over the years. But the key thing is to stop adding $1 trillion every single year, even when the economy is strong. And that's where Congress, Republicans and Democrats both, have looked the other way and keep spending more than we take in. We spend about $4 trillion a year. We tax about $3 trillion a year. You can't keep doing that even in good times. And that's why my Trust Act is designed to focus on where we spend 2/3 of federal spending. That's on those trust funds: Social Security, disability, Medicare, Medicaid, and the highways.
How much is acceptable to you to continue spending on the current situation for our small businesses and individuals that need it? How much is appropriate in your mind?
Well, we want to make sure that we're being smart. So, for instance, we want to help people that are in crisis. 2, we don't want businesses to close down so that people would lose their jobs. Then neither the businesses nor those people could be paying taxes. So you want to provide sufficient liquidity to keep the economy going. Otherwise, you really start racking up the debt. So what's that sweet spot? I believe it's going to be $1 trillion or less in the next round. I think the Democrats have proposed $3 trillion. I don't think that has any prospect whatsoever of being passed.
Are you satisfied with the PPP program? We've heard from local businesses who have been very frustrated trying to get that money. Do you think it can work more efficiently moving forward?
Well, it's a bit, I joke, it's a bit like the banana stand on Arrested Development, with 2 people standing in line every single day, and then suddenly there are 2,000 people standing in line. So this agency was putting out maybe $40 million a month, and that went overnight to $500 billion. I mean, they were completely overwhelmed. it's up and working pretty well now. A huge majority of the businesses in America with under 500 employees have received funds from the PPP program. Some banks, for instance, I was talking to folks in Cache Valley. They said that the Cache Valley Bank was calling small employers, encouraging them to sign up and get the PPP loan, which they did. It's been a very, very successful program. It has saved a lot of businesses and a lot of jobs as a result of doing so. My guess is we'll continue to expand it in the future.
All right, stay with the Senator coming up. A closer look at how the government has responded to the pandemic and how Senator Romney hopes to shape that response going forward. That's next.